Hello everyone. I wish you all a wonderful and peaceful day. Today, we're going to discover an emotional story about a mysterious woman who suddenly returns after 20 years and stands crying in front of Diep's house. But what shocked everyone the most was the moment she quietly whispered in the middle of the night, "My daughter, could it really be you?" What secret has she been hiding for all these years? If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos. Late afternoon settled quietly over the narrow dirt road as Diep slowly walked home from the village market. The worn bamboo basket hanging from her arm now much lighter after a long day of selling vegetables. The sky above the countryside had begun fading into soft shades of orange and grey, while cool wind moved gently through the tall bamboo trees surrounding the small wooden house where she lived with her daughter. Somewhere in the distance, chickens called to one another as villagers prepared dinner after another ordinary day. Everything around Diep felt familiar and calm, just like every evening before. But the moment she pushed open the small wooden gate and stepped into the yard, her footsteps suddenly stopped. Standing silently in front of her house was a middle-aged woman she had never seen before. The stranger stood completely still near the porch, staring at the old wooden home with trembling eyes full of sorrow, as though she were looking at something she had once loved and lost forever. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Diep tightened her grip around the basket while carefully studying the woman's tired face. Her clothes looked dusty from traveling, and there was something painfully heavy in the way she looked around the yard, like every corner of the land carried memories too difficult to forget. Finally, after hearing Diep's footsteps against the dirt ground, the woman slowly turned around. Her eyes were already red from crying. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't mean to stand here like this." Diep remained cautious but calm. "Are you looking for someone?" The woman glanced around the yard once more before answering. 20 years ago, my family used to live here." The words hung quietly between them as evening wind rustled through the bamboo leaves overhead. The woman slowly pointed toward one corner of the yard. "There used to be a fence over there," she whispered, "and beside the house, there was a guava tree." Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. "But now, everything is gone." Tears gathered in her eyes again as she looked at the house standing where her old home once existed. "I thought maybe something would still remain after all these years," she continued quietly, "even just a little." Diep stood silently listening, while sympathy slowly rose inside her chest. She did not know who this woman was, or what had happened during those missing 20 years. But the pain in her voice felt too real to ignore. The stranger looked emotionally exhausted, like someone who had spent years carrying regret and loneliness alone. For a brief moment, Diep imagined what it would feel like to return to a place filled with childhood memories, only to discover that time had erased everything completely. The woman suddenly lowered her head and wiped away her tears, embarrassed by her own emotions. Without saying anything else, Diep quietly stepped inside the house and returned a moment later holding a glass of water. Please drink, she said gently. The woman looked surprised by the kindness. I'm troubling you too much already. It's okay, Diep replied softly. The woman accepted the glass with trembling hands. My name is Dieu, she whispered. Diep. The moment she heard that name, something strange crossed Dieu's face. Her expression shifted for only a second, but it was enough for Diep to notice. It looked almost like shock, mixed with disbelief. Before Diep could think more about it, the sound of tiny footsteps suddenly came running from inside the house. Mom! Little Nee rushed excitedly out into the yard before stopping abruptly the moment she saw the unfamiliar woman sitting near the porch. The child stared curiously for a few seconds, then slowly walked closer without fear. Who is this? She asked innocently. Dieu quickly wiped the remaining tears from her cheeks and forced a small smile, but Nee immediately noticed her red eyes. Why are you crying? The little girl asked softly. Dieu shook her head gently. I'm not crying. But your eyes are sad, Nee replied in the honest way only children could. The simple sentence nearly broke Dieu completely. Nee slowly sat beside her and placed one tiny hand on the older woman's arm. Don't cry anymore, she whispered. My mum is very kind. Dieu lowered her head, trying desperately to control her emotions. The warmth in the little girl's voice seemed to reach somewhere deep inside her heart, somewhere untouched for many years. Diep stood quietly nearby, watching the scene unfold in silence. Even she could not fully understand why she suddenly felt comfortable letting this stranger remain there. There was something about Dieu that felt both unfamiliar and strangely close at the same time. As darkness slowly gathered around the countryside, Diep lit the small lamp hanging near the front porch while preparing vegetables for dinner inside the tiny kitchen beside the house. Outside, Nee continued talking endlessly to Dieu about childish things, asking questions about where she came from, whether she had children, and if she had ever visited Hanoi. Every time the child laughed, Dieu's eyes filled with tears again. A few minutes later, Nee suddenly ran into the kitchen. Mom, can Grandma stay here tonight? Diep paused briefly before looking toward the porch. Dieu sat quietly beneath the dim yellow light, looking exhausted and lonely. The older woman quickly shook her head. No, I've already caused enough trouble. It's getting late, Diep replied calmly. You can stay for dinner and leave tomorrow morning. Dieu looked down at her hands, as though trying to hide how emotional those words made her feel. Thank you, she whispered. You're very kind. Inside the small kitchen, firelight flickered softly against the old wooden walls, while Diep prepared rice and vegetables over the wood stove. Dieu insisted on helping, despite being told to rest. She slowly sorted vegetables beside Diep, while quietly observing every movement she made. Several times, Diep caught the older woman staring at her with an expression she could not understand. It was not curiosity. It felt deeper than that, almost painful. After several long moments of silence, Dieu finally spoke again. Who raised you when you were little? Diep continued washing vegetables without looking up. My relatives. And your parents? The question made the atmosphere inside the kitchen suddenly heavier. Diep answered quietly, "I don't really remember them." Dieu lowered her eyes, but a few seconds later, she carefully asked another question. "Do you still have anything from your childhood? Maybe something your mother left for you?" This time, Diep frowned slightly. The question felt too personal, too strange. She slowly turned to look at the older woman beside her. "Why are you asking me all this?" For a brief second, Dieu looked startled, almost as though she had forgotten to hide her emotions. Then she forced a weak smile and lowered her head again. "I'm sorry," she whispered softly. "You just remind me of someone I once knew." But even after saying those words, Dieu continued looking at Diep with trembling eyes, full of sadness, as though she were desperately searching for proof of something she had waited 20 years to find. Night settled completely over the quiet countryside, while the small wooden house glowed softly beneath the weak yellow light hanging near the porch. Outside, the sound of insects filled the darkness, mixing with the distant barking of dogs somewhere far across the village. Inside the kitchen, the warmth from the wood stove spread gently through the air as Diep continued preparing dinner in silence. Dieu sat beside her sorting vegetables into small baskets, but her eyes never stopped drifting back toward Diep's face. Every movement, every expression, even the way Diep lowered her head while cooking seemed to pull old memories out of the woman's heart. Several times, Dieu opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something important, only to stop herself at the last second. The atmosphere between them slowly became heavier with every passing minute. Meanwhile, little Nee continued running in and out of the kitchen, happily talking about everything she could think of. She showed Dieu her school books, her favorite toys, and even the tiny corner where she slept beside her mother every night. The child's innocent excitement brought brief moments of warmth into the quiet house, but every smile from Nee only seemed to make Dieu more emotional. At one point, Nee climbed onto Dieu's lap without hesitation and wrapped her small arms around the older woman's neck. "Grandma, don't leave tomorrow," she said innocently. The sudden words caught Dieu completely off guard. Her eyes instantly filled with tears again as she gently stroked the little girl's hair. "Why do you want me to stay?" she whispered softly. Nee smiled brightly. "Because you feel like family." The sentence hit Dieu harder than anything else that evening. She quickly turned her face away, pretending to focus on the vegetables in her hands so nobody would notice her crying again. But Diep noticed. She noticed every trembling breath, every painful silence, every strange look the older woman gave her whenever she wasn't paying attention. The feeling growing inside Diep was difficult to explain. Part of her felt sympathy for this lonely woman who had returned after 20 years only to discover that the life she once knew no longer existed. But another part of her was beginning to feel uneasy. Dieu seemed far too interested in her life. The questions were becoming increasingly personal. After dinner was finally prepared, the three of them carried the simple meal outside to the small wooden table in the yard. Steam rose gently from bowls of rice and vegetable soup, while cool night wind moved through the bamboo trees behind the house. Ni sat between Diep and Dieu, happily filling the silence with childish conversation, while the two adults remained unusually quiet. Several times during the meal, Dieu looked at Diep with eyes filled with hesitation, as though she were fighting against words trapped inside her chest. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke carefully. "Diep, can I ask you something?" Diep looked up from her bowl. "What is it?" Dieu lowered her eyes for a moment before continuing. "Have you ever tried searching for your parents?" The question caused the atmosphere around the table to freeze instantly. Even the sounds of insects outside suddenly seemed louder in the silence that followed. Diep slowly placed her chopsticks down. "Why are you asking about that again?" she replied quietly. Dieu immediately looked nervous. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." Diep stared down at the bowl in front of her for several long seconds before finally speaking again. "When I was little, people around me always told different stories," she said softly. "Some said my parents died a long time ago. Others said my mother was still alive somewhere." After hearing so many things for years, I stopped trying to understand what was true anymore. Dieu's fingers tightened around her bowl. Her eyes had already turned red again. "And if," she began slowly, her voice trembling, "if one day your mother suddenly came back, would you accept her?" The question landed heavily between them. Diep did not answer immediately. She simply sat there staring into the darkness beyond the yard, while painful memories slowly resurfaced inside her mind. Growing up without parents had left wounds she rarely spoke about. Watching other children with families while she stood alone. Wondering every birthday why nobody came for her. Listening to whispers from neighbors who spoke about her like a child nobody wanted. Even now, after so many years, those feelings had never fully disappeared. "I don't know," Diep admitted quietly at last. "Maybe some things are too late to fix." Dieu looked like she had stopped breathing. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks before she lowered her head to hide them. Ni looked back and forth between both women, confused by the sudden sadness around the table. "Why are you crying again?" she asked softly. Dieu quickly wiped her face and forced a smile. "It's nothing, dear." But it was clearly not nothing. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Later that night, after cleaning the dishes and putting Ni to bed, Diep spread blankets for Dieu near the front room of the house. The older woman thanked her repeatedly, apologizing over and over for causing trouble, but Diep simply nodded quietly without saying much. Something about the entire evening continued bothering her. She could not explain it logically, but every question Dieu asked felt connected to something deeper the woman was desperately trying to hide. Before going to sleep, Diep stepped outside one last time to lock the gate. The night air felt cold against her skin, while clouds slowly gathered above the bamboo trees. Somewhere far away, distant thunder rolled quietly across the sky. When she returned inside, she noticed Dieu sitting alone near the small lamp, staring silently at an old cloth bundle resting in her lap. The woman quickly covered it the moment she realized Diep was looking at her. "You should rest," Diep said gently. Dieu nodded immediately. Yes, thank you. Diep hesitated briefly before walking away. Hours later, sometime after midnight, heavy rain finally began falling across the countryside. The sound of rain striking the roof woke Diep suddenly from sleep. For a moment, she lay still, beside me, listening to the storm outside. Then she noticed something strange. The blanket laid out for Dieu was empty. Frowning slightly, Diep quietly stood up and walked toward the doorway. Through the darkness, she spotted a faint figure sitting alone outside, beneath the porch, while rain poured heavily beyond the roof. Dieu sat there motionless, clutching the old cloth bundle tightly against her chest. Her shoulders trembled violently as soft sobs escaped into the night. Diep stopped walking when she heard the older woman whisper something through broken tears. "My daughter," Dieu cried softly. "Could it really be you?" Diep's entire body froze. The rain continued falling heavily around the small house, while thunder echoed across the dark countryside. Hidden in the shadows behind the doorway, Diep stared silently at the crying woman outside, her heart beginning to pound with fear, confusion, and a terrible feeling she could not yet understand. After returning home from the market, Diep discovers a mysterious woman standing silently in front of her house, crying while looking at the land where her family once lived 20 years ago. Feeling sympathy for the stranger, Diep invites her to stay for dinner and rest overnight. As the evening continues, little Nee quickly becomes attached to the woman, innocently treating her like family. However, Diep slowly notices something strange. The woman, named Dieu, keeps staring at her with emotional eyes and asks unusual questions about her childhood, parents, and old belongings. The atmosphere inside the small countryside home becomes increasingly tense as hidden emotions begin surfacing. Late that night, Diep wakes up during a heavy rainstorm and secretly overhears Dieu crying alone outside while whispering heartbreaking words that may reveal a shocking truth connected to Diep's forgotten past.